Welcome to the GearVR Framework tutorial. This is Lesson 1, Installing GearVR. We have an installer. You click on gearvrfinstaller.exe and you'll get a little dialog like this, and you say yes, and it'll allow you to select the directory where it's going to put the GearVR sources and demos. Now, as part of this process, it's going to install the Android Studio and Java Development Kit. So those are pretty big. Please be patient. This step will take a bit of time. The next step in our installation is to install the Java Development Kit. This should be installed to the default directory, even though it lets you change. Note that Android Studio may need this path. Sometimes it asks for it if you install the JDK afterwards, but if you install it ahead of time as we are now, it probably won't require it. After the JDK is done, we will get prompted with the Android Studio installer. And at that point, we'll be able to install Android Studio and set up its SDKs. But for now, we're installing Java. This will take a bit of time. Please be patient. The Android Setup Wizard starts, and you should install the Android Studio and Android SDK. Now, if you already have the Android SDK, you don't need to install it. If you already have Android Studio and it's a later version like 2.0 or 2.1, you don't need to install it. This installer will uninstall Android Studio for you, the older version. In this case, I'm going to install Android Studio 2.1. Note that the default location for your Android Studio, your Android SDK, is in your app data local Android SDK folder. You can change this location. You will potentially need to know where this is, so keep track of what path you installed there because we will be needing it later. The Android Setup Wizard starts, and you should install the Android Studio and Android SDK. Now, if you already have the Android SDK, you don't need to install it. If you already have Android Studio and it's a later version like 2.0 or 2.1, you don't need to install it. This installer will uninstall Android Studio for you, the older version. In this case, I'm going to install Android Studio 2.1. Note that the default location for your Android Studio, your Android SDK, is in your app data local Android SDK folder. You can change this location. You will potentially need to know where this is, so keep track of what path you installed there because we will be needing it later. While we're waiting for that to finish, let's look at what we have to do next. Once the SDK manager is available, you use it to install Android SDK 19. So this involves clicking on Configure, selecting the SDK manager, and then going to SDK 19 and clicking on that. You can also specify the path that your SDK lives at if you had a pre-installed one and you're just installing Android Studio. So let's go through those steps now. I click on the SDK manager, and then it might take some time to populate, but you'll get the SDKs that you have installed, and you can install extra ones. I'm not going to do that. Android 4.4 KitKat API level 19 is the one that we need for our build. So that's the one that you should install. I'm not going to install it here, but I am going to open up the tutorial lesson 2 project next. Now that we have everything configured, we can finally build one of the demos. To do this, we would select Open an Existing Android Studio project and then go into the directory where the GearVR demos are and select one of the top level projects. And once you do that, you'll see this Gradle compiling script dialog. And this may be up for quite a while, so don't be alarmed, just be patient. So here's Android Studio. We're going to go through that process. Open existing project. Now, our projects should be in C, Samsung, GearVR Framework, and GearVR demos. The docs directory has the tutorial presentations and documentation. The GearVR directory has sources for the framework itself and for extensions like the 3D cursor or widget plugin, and then the GearVR demos has all the tutorials and sample programs. So the one that we want is tutorial lesson 2. And when it happens to finish, after it does this configure thing, we should get a screen that looks kind of like this. This and this might not be open, but because these windows by default are closed in Android Studio. When you want to build a project, you select Build, Make Project, and then we should get Build Successful. That's what we expect. So when it finishes configuring our project, we'll try to build it and see if it works. Configuring is done, and as you can see, we are missing the project and the Gradle console windows. So to build the project, we select Make Project, and then the output for the build comes into this Gradle console. Your build will probably take longer than my build because you're going to build it for the first time, and I've actually already built it. So be patient. This Gradle build running, you can actually look at all the tasks that are running in the background. We only have this Gradle build, but if you have a configuration task, it could explain why you don't see any build output here, because sometimes it'll be configuring before it's building. In this situation, it's taking its time. And we finally get build successful. So if you get this, your installation went well. The last topic for lesson 1 is configuring ADB. If you click the terminal window, you notice I can say something like ADB devices, and it will run ADB and tell me the devices. If you want to be able to run ADB, there might be some steps that you need to do after you've configured the Android SDK. Android Studio can't find ADB unless you add the SDK platform tools to the path environment variable. So the way you would do that is you would get to the advanced system settings of your PC and then select environment variables, and this will give you a dialog that shows all the environment variables. The one you want is path, and then you have to add the Android SDK platform tools path, which is just the SDK path with platform-tools appended. And once you do that, it should be able to find ADB. I'll show you that process now. The easiest way to get the system settings is to right-click on the Start menu and select System. And that will bring up this System dialog. Then you can select the Advanced System Settings and you'll get the environment variables. And then you can see that when I click Path, it shows my environment variables. I have C SDK Android Platform-Tools. And this is the one you need in order for ADB to be able to run. So if you remember that one, you're good to go. So I hope you enjoyed the GearVR Framework tutorial lesson 1, and hope you will try lesson 2 where you get to do some actual coding with the GearVR Framework.